you ever made a decision, maybe bought something you didn't need or snapped at someone for no good reason, and then later you just find yourself thinking, why on earth did I do that? It's a really common feeling, right? That little gap between the rational person we believe we are and the impulsive person who seems to grab the steering wheel sometimes. That's the mystery that Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman takes on in his incredible book, Thinking Fast and Slow. So today, we're going to dive into the powerful model he created to help us understand ourselves, and we're going to do it with a clear, modern perspective. So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll meet the two main characters that are running the show in our minds. Then, we'll explore how our fast-thinking hero can sometimes lead us into very predictable mistakes. After that, and this is really important, we're going to take an honest look at the science itself, what's held up over time and what hasn't. And finally, we'll get to the most practical lesson of all, how we can learn to think just a little bit better.
Now, the central idea of the book isn't about two literal parts of your brain. It's a metaphor. It's a brilliant way to tell the story of what's happening inside our own heads. Kahneman introduces us to these two characters or systems that are constantly interacting, shaping pretty much every thought and choice we make. And, just getting to know them is a huge first step.
This is really the core question, isn't it? We all like to imagine that we are the conscious author of our own thoughts. But the truth is, a huge amount of our mental life is running on autopilot, just below the surface. And it's that constant push and pull between our intuitive self and our logical self that really drives the entire narrative of this book.
Okay, this table lays it out perfectly. You can think of System 1 as your gut instinct. It's the star of the show, running automatically, giving you instant feelings and impressions. System 2, on the other hand, is the conscious reasoning you. It's the part that does the heavy lifting, like trying to solve a tricky math problem. Now, in theory, System 1 gives suggestions and System 2 makes the final call. But as we're about to see, it doesn't always go down like that.
So, let's start with System 1. Kahneman actually calls it the hero of the book because it does almost everything. It's this silent, incredibly sophisticated machine that handles everything from knowing a friend's face in a crowd to driving your car when the road is clear. It's not some primitive relic, it's a super efficient pattern-matching computer.
Butter. The word just popped into your head, right? You didn't decide to think it, you couldn't have stopped it. That feeling right there is the feeling of System 1. It is automatic, it's effortless, and it is always on, constantly trying to make sense of your world and figure out what happens next.
And this really gets to the heart of it. System 1 is our brain's default setting. Its job is to build the most coherent story it can with the information it has. Now that's incredibly efficient, but there's a huge downside. It loves to jump to conclusions, and it will always prefer a story that feels right over one that's actually true. And this is where our systematic errors, our cognitive biases, come from.
All right, now let's meet our second character, System 2. This is the part of you that you probably identify as you. It's that voice in your head that deliberates and makes conscious choices. But, and this is key, Kahneman points out that this system has one major personality flaw. It is fundamentally lazy. It will avoid effort whenever it can get away with it.
You don't have to solve it, but just notice what happens in your mind. You can feel it, right? Your attention has to narrow. You have to consciously pull the rules of multiplication out of your memory, hold a few numbers in your head at once. That feeling of mental strain, that's the signature of System 2 kicking into gear. It's hard work, and your brain is designed to conserve energy. So if System 1 offers up an easy answer, System 2 is almost always happy to sign off on it.
So System 2's main job is to act as a check on System 1's impulses. It's supposed to be the bouncer at the door of your mind. When your intuition gets into trouble, System 2 is meant to step in and take over. But here's the problem. It gets tired. When we're stressed or distracted or just plain worn out, it's far more likely to just wave System 1's suggestions right on through, whether they're good or bad. So this is the dynamic. A fast, storytelling System 1 and a slow, lazy System 2. And this relationship is the breeding ground for our cognitive biases. These aren't just random mistakes, okay? They are predictable, systematic errors in our thinking that come from the way our minds are built. Let's look at one of the most powerful examples from the book.
The anchoring effect is one of the most well-documented biases out there. Basically, whenever we have to estimate something, our mind grabs onto the first number it sees, the anchor, and then adjusts from there. The problem is, we almost never adjust far enough away from that initial anchor.
Just take a second. Don't look it up, just let a number come to mind. Is it higher or lower than 65%? And what's your best guess of the actual number? Got it? Okay.
All right, now let's try that again.
totally forget the last question. Is the percentage of African nations in the UN higher or lower than 10%? And now what's your best guess? If you're like most people, your two answers are probably very, very different. So that first number, 65, was a completely random high anchor. And your guess was probably much higher than your guess for the second question, where we used a low anchor of 10. The first number you see, even when it's totally irrelevant, contaminates your judgment. By the way, the real answer is around 28%. So here's the action. The next time you're negotiating a salary or buying a house, you have to be incredibly aware of that first number. Consciously set it aside and force your System 2 to come up with its own starting point based on real data.
Okay, this next part is really important if you want to understand this book's place in the world today. Thinking Fast and Slow came out in 2011, which was right before something called the replication crisis in psychology really took hold. This was a period where scientists found that many famous studies, including some that Kahneman mentioned in the book, couldn't be repeated with the same results. So for the sake of intellectual honesty, we have to look at this head-on.
This quote from a meta-scientist gets right to the point. Now, this does not mean the whole book is wrong, but it does mean that the scientific foundation for some of the specific examples isn't as solid as we once thought. Some of the building blocks have started to crumble a bit.
This gives us a much clearer picture. We see some ideas like social priming, the idea that little unconscious cues can totally change our behavior. Well, that's been heavily questioned. But other core concepts like the anchoring effect we just saw or a general tendency to be overconfident have turned out to be really robust. They've been replicated time and time again. And what's truly remarkable is Kahneman's own response to all of this. He openly said that he put too much faith in some of these earlier, smaller studies. But here's what a lot of people miss. This isn't a failure of the book. This is actually a perfect example of science working exactly as it should. Science isn't about finding facts that are set in stone. It's a process of constantly correcting itself, getting closer and closer to the truth.
So, where does that leave us? Do these debates mean we should just toss the book aside? Absolutely not. You see, the most powerful, the most lasting part of Thinking Fast and Slow was never just a list of biases. It was the language, the framework it gave us to understand the very architecture of our own minds.
This, right here, is the key takeaway. You're never going to switch off System 1. You can't just delete your biases. But by understanding how the machine works, you can start to recognize the situations where you're most likely to make a mistake. The goal isn't to be a perfect robot. It's just to be a little wiser, a little less gullible.
The real legacy of this book is the vocabulary. Just having the words to be able to pause and think, aha, that's my System 1 jumping to a conclusion. Or, hang on, I need to engage System 2 here. That is an incredibly powerful tool. The model itself gives you a handle to grab onto when you're trying to think about your own thinking.
So what can you actually do with all this? Here is the simplest, most powerful action you can take. Cultivate the habit of the 3-second pause. The next time you feel a really strong emotion or a quick gut reaction, especially when the stakes are high, just stop for 3 seconds. And in that tiny space, just ask yourself, is this my fast-thinking System 1 talking? Do I have all the facts? That little pause is often all it takes to let your slower, more deliberate System 2 join the conversation.
In the end, the value of Kahneman's work isn't about being able to name a bunch of biases to sound smart at a party. It's about the quiet, humble practice of questioning our own certainties. It's about developing the wisdom to know when we should trust our gut and when we absolutely need to stop and think again.
If you found this insight helpful, please consider liking it and subscribing to Daily Book Insight for more. We've also put together a free action plan to help you apply these ideas, and you can download that from the link in the description. Thanks for joining me.